Hi, I'm John Stevenson, and we're going to be looking at the books of 1st and 2nd Kings in our continuing survey of the Old Testament. We are coming now, so we're still in the historical books. Notice we're coming now to the parts about 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther, the latter parts of those historical books. In 1st and 2nd Samuel, we had seen the rise and fall of Saul in 1st Samuel, then the rise and fall of David in 2nd Samuel. Now we're looking at 1st and 2nd Kings. 1st Kings is going to start off with Solomon, and then we'll have the kingdom divided, and then 2nd Kings will talk about the fall of the divided kingdom. Let's zoom in on that, and we see that 1st Kings chapters 1 through 11 is the Solomon story, and then in 1st Kings chapter 12, the kingdom splits into the north and the south. So we're going to have the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah. And that's going to continue all the way until 2nd Kings chapter 17, when the northern kingdom is taken away into captivity. And the southern kingdom remains. And so they will still be there as we go into the last part of 2nd Kings chapter 18 through 25. We pick up in 1 Kings chapter 4, verse 21. Now Solomon ruled over all the kingdoms from the river. When you say the river and you don't define it, that's in this context, it's talking about the Euphrates River, from the river to the land of the Philistines and to the border of Egypt. They brought tribute and served Solomon all the days of his life. Now that doesn't mean that the kingdom of Israel was that big. Solomon was lording it, and I don't mean in necessarily a bad way, although the others might have felt that way. He was exercising sovereignty over a wider area than just the land of Israel. Land of Israel is that little tiny area from Dan in the north to Beersheba in the south, right alongside the Sea of Galilee, the Dead Sea, and the Jordan River, connecting them. But notice, going all the way down to the Red Sea, the Gulf of Aqaba in particular, and all the way north to the Euphrates River, these are the areas over which those kings paid him tribute. They recognize him as the bigger king, and they're the smaller kingdoms in those areas. So we read that Judah and Israel lived in safety, every man under his vine and his fig tree. That's sort of a figure of speech. We would say today everyone had an apple pie on the windowsill and I don't know, a pot roast in the oven, something like that. Under his vine, under his fig tree, from Dan even to Beersheba. Notice Dan, that's as far north as you can go, still be in the land of Israel. And to Beersheba, that's as far south as you can go and still be in the land of Israel, all the days of Solomon. Chapter 4, verse 26, Solomon had 4,000 stalls of horses for his chariots and 12,000 horsemen. Now that's a lot. 40,000 stalls of horses. The Septuagint, that's the Greek translation of the Hebrew text, reads that Solomon had 4,000. Notice somebody added a zero there. Stalls of horses for his chariots and 12,000, still 12,000 horsemen. That's still a lot of horsemen. But that 40,000 versus 4,000, I think, is probably a bit more manageable. We're looking here at a picture of some of Solomon's, I guess you could call them Solomon's stables. You can see the big feeding troughs, or what we would say mangers, made of stone. And this is in the area of Megiddo, just south of the valley of Jezreel. Now, the law had specifically stated, Deuteronomy chapter 17, verse 16, said, when you get a king, he is not to multiply horses for himself. That is, they weren't to trust in their military, they were to trust in God. And this reminds me of Psalm chapter 20 and verse 7 that talks about how some boast in chariots and some in horses, but we will boast in the name of the Lord our God. And that's what the Israelites were supposed to do. That's what the Israelite kings were supposed to do. And in the case of Solomon, we don't see him quite measuring up to that. Chapter 4, verse 30, Solomon's wisdom surpassed the wisdom of all the sons of the east and all the wisdom of Egypt, for he was wiser than all men, than Ethan the Ezrahite, Heman, Calcol, and Darda, the sons of Mahol, and his fame was known in all the surrounding nations. He also spoke 3,000 proverbs. Actually, you can count most of those in the book of Proverbs. And his songs were 1,005. He spoke of trees from the cedar that is in Lebanon. This part reminds me of some things in the book of Ecclesiastes. He spoke of trees from the cedar that is in Lebanon, even to the hyssop that grows on the wall. He spoke also of animals and birds and creeping things and fish. And Solomon, his wisdom was not just in one particular area, but notice, in a wide variety of areas. His wisdom becomes legendary. Now, chapter 6 and verse 1, we read that it came about in the 480th year after the sons of Israel came out of the land of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, in the month of Ziv, which is in the 2nd month, that he began to build the house of the Lord. And so he's going to start building the temple. Thiel's book, and I'm taking this from his very well-known Chronicles of the Hebrew Kings. He seeks to date this. Most folks agree that Solomon's death is around 931 BC. I like to round it off to the nearest 10, but I'm going to go with 931. And so then he takes this literally. Not everybody does. Notice 480 years. Well, I would say at least I would think we're supposed to take it to the nearest 10. There are others that say, no, this is just speaking of generations, and actually it's more like 200 years. I I haven't been convinced of that position. So I'm just going to take it at face value. And this would place the Exodus, if this is correct, in the neighborhood of 1440. Notice our Thiel says 1447, and I'm not going to argue about, rounding it off to the nearest 10 or not. But, he says 1447 BC for the Exodus of Israel from Egypt. And I think that's probably pretty close to accurate. In Second Chronicles, and we're going to look separately at Chronicles, but I just want to bring this in. Second Chronicles chapter 3 and verse 1, we read that Solomon began to build the house of the Lord in Jerusalem on Mount Moriah. The last time we saw the term Moriah used was Abraham taking Isaac to the land of Moriah, on a mountain there where he offers him up, and then remember, God interrupts the offering, and so that Isaac doesn't get killed, and instead a ram caught in a thicket is replaced. That was Genesis chapter 22. Well, here, that same location, I take it as such, on Mount Moriah, where the Lord had appeared to his father David. Remember, in the last account in that last chapter of 2 Samuel, David had said, "Take me instead," and God had shown up and said, "Okay, as a result of your repentance and your willingness to substitute yourself, the plague that had been coming against Jerusalem had been stopped." Well, that place now where David had offered a sacrifice, notice way over on the right, you see up in that high place on the right, is where the temple is going to be built. So that Jerusalem will be south of the temple. Now, eventually, the walls of Jerusalem are going to grow. They're going to grow northward, and I mean, not supernaturally. It's going to be people building walls to greater areas. And so the city's going to grow to the north, and it's also going to grow eventually to the west. It really doesn't grow too much to the east because, that's the Kidron Valley. And there's, even today, there's not much city in the Kidron Valley. It's largely unpopulated. There's tombs and there's things like that, but there's no houses there in the Kidron Valley, or not many of them at least. Now, the temple, notice it is following the same general structure of the tabernacle, where you have the main hall, or what we would call the holy place, and then you have the innermost shrine, the very holy place. The way you say that in Hebrew is you say it twice, the Holy of Holies. And notice this picture, and I think they've got it right here, that the Holy of Holies would have been a higher place because this is on top of a mountain, and mountains, have a peak. And so they would probably use the very highest part of that mountain to show where the Holy of Holies is going to be. Here are the specific dimensions. Notice you've got, and I don't think in cubits. A cubit is roughly about 18 inches. So if that's correct, and I think it is, then we can put it into feet. Where the tabernacle, the entire area of the tabernacle was 40 feet. Now, this is the tabernacle itself, not the outer court, but the tabernacle itself was about 45 feet in length. Notice the temple, everything is doubled. So if the tabernacle was 45 feet in length, the temple is 90 feet in length, and that's a decent sized structure. But now we're not talking about just the outer courts; we're talking about the temple itself. Here's another artist's conception of what that temple would look like, again with the stairs leading up to the top. Notice that in the Holy of Holies, you had the Ark of the Covenant, but you also had, because this was big enough to hold that, you also had the statues of two cherubim. Now, is this what cherubim look like? I don't know. I've never seen a cherub. Cherub is singular, cherubim are plural. But we're told that they had wings, and they were made of olive wood, but they were overlaid with gold, and that the wings touch each other, and it spread outward to touch the outer walls, the inner part of the wall of the Holy of Holies. So they sort of fill that up with the Ark of the Covenant seated in the middle, representing the very throne of God. If you go there today, you will see the Dome of the Rock. And notice it's still a mountain. You have to go up some steps to get up to the level of the Dome of the Rock. And then the rock itself, the bedrock, and it's called the Dome of the Rock because it oversees. Let's look at a picture of that. It oversees, this compliments of an old photo from National Geographic. You're looking at the top of the mountain, the peak of the mountain, and that's likely, I think, where the Holy of Holies would have been located. Some people try to say exact. I'm not going to try to do that, but probably somewhere on this rock would have been the Holy of Holies. And so here we have the temple, and notice it becomes a temple complex because outside of the temple there is a great altar, very, very high, so that the priests could go up and they could offer offerings on the altar. There's also a very large laver of water. Remember, you had a small portable laver of water that they would take through the wilderness back in Moses' day, but now that's been replaced by something much larger. It's a big laver that was on the back of 12 oxen facing, 3 on each corner. So 4 groups of these metal, bronze oxen facing outward. And then the laver itself was known as the sea, not letter C, but the sea as an ocean. So a lot of water in that was the idea. And this became the new place of worship. It's going to replace the tabernacle, and the Ark of the Covenant will be brought here so that it will be housed here within the temple. Chapter 11, verse 1. Now we have the problem. It was perhaps hinted at before, but now we see it as an open problem. Now, King Solomon loved many foreign women, along with the daughter of Pharaoh. Now, most of these, I think, had probably been marriages of state, where they were, Solomon was entering into alliances with the surrounding countries. That's how he was going to exercise his sovereignty. Along with the daughter of Pharaoh, notice Moabite, Ammonite, Edomite, Sidonian, and Hittite women. Well, all of those came with their own gods. Notice verse 2, from the nations concerning which the Lord had said to the sons of Israel, you shall not associate with them, nor shall they associate with you, for they will surely turn your heart away after their gods. And Solomon held fast to these in love, and he begins to hold fast to their gods as well. Verse 3, he had 700 wives, princesses, and 300 concubines, and his wives turned his heart away. For when Solomon was old, his wives turned his heart away after other gods, and his heart was not wholly devoted to the Lord his God, as the heart of David his father had been. David was single-mindedly dedicated to the Lord. Solomon, his attention began to be drawn, especially in his older age, into other directions. So his heart was turned away, and here's the troubling part, after other gods. He actually participated in these various forms of worship. Now, chapter 11, verse 29. It came about at that time when Jeroboam had been Solomon's chief, the chief of his construction projects. We would say maybe chief taskmaster, but he was more of an administrator. When Jeroboam went out of Jerusalem, the prophet Ahijah, the Shilonite, found him on the road. Now, Ahijah had clothed himself with a new cloak, and both of them were alone in the field. And then Ahijah took hold of the new cloak which was on him and tore it into 12 pieces. We've seen this sort of imagery before. Remember at the end of the book of Judges, where you had the concubine who had been raped and killed, and her husband had taken her body and cut it into 12 pieces as a sign, as a message going out to the 12 tribes of Israel. Some bad things are happening. And then later on, Saul had taken his oxen and had slaughtered them and cut them into 12 pieces as a message. All you 12 tribes of Israel, come together. We need to go to the aid of a city that is being besieged. And now he does the same thing. But notice the tearing of a cloak. That brings in some other imagery, the imagery that we saw with Saul. Remember how Saul had tried to grab a hold of Samuel when Samuel was rejecting him, and his cloak had torn. And Samuel had said, in the same way the cloak tore, in the same way the nation of Israel is going to be torn from your fingertips. It's going to be taken away from you. Well, here he takes a cloak, he tears it into 12 pieces, and he said to Jeroboam, take for yourself 10 pieces, for thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, behold, I will tear the kingdom out of the hand of Solomon and give you 10 tribes. But he will have one tribe for the sake of my servant David and for the sake of Jerusalem, the city which I have chosen from all the tribes of Israel. And you say, wait a minute, there's 10 tribes, and then Solomon gets one tribe. How many tribes are there? Well, I often give this as a sort of a test question to my students. How many tribes of Israel are there? And let me just say, it's a trick question. We usually answer 12, but actually, if we're talking tribes, there were 13 tribes. Why? Because Joseph was divided into 2 tribes. There was 12 sons of Israel, and Joseph, his sons got a double portion, Ephraim and Manasseh. But as far as the land values were concerned, as far as the land inheritance, there were only 12 parts of the inheritance because Levi was given over to the Lord. It was from Levi that we get the priesthood, and they didn't have their own land portion. They lived all throughout the land in different cities, in cities of refuge, and in other areas like that. So yes, there's going to be 10 tribes that are taken, and then one tribe, but really it's going to end up being sort of 2 or 3. It will be the tribe of Judah, but also the Levites, and also some from the tribe of Benjamin are going to be, and some will be taken, some will be left. I don't know. Make of that what you will. But notice, because they've forsaken me and have worshipped Ashtoreth, that is the same thing that Solomon had done. Now they are doing as well. Worshipped Ashtaroth, the goddess of the Sidonians, Chemosh, the god of Moab, Milcom, the god of the sons of Ammon, and they have not walked in my ways, doing what is right in my sight, and observing my statutes and my ordinances, as his father David did. And as Solomon has gone, so the nation is going, and so there's going to be judgment that comes. And so what we have is a separation now, and it's going to take place after the death of Solomon, where you're going to have Israel and Judah that will be separated into 2 different countries. Now, it takes place in this way, 1 Kings chapter 12, verse 1, after Solomon had died, when Rehoboam, this is the son of Solomon, went to Shechem, for all Israel had come to Shechem to make him king. Why are they going to Shechem? Because Shechem is the place where the covenant had been ratified, and where the blessings and the cursings of the covenant had been read out, where half the tribes of Israel had gone onto one mountain. And notice you've got the city today, they call it by a different name, but still the city which one time had been Shechem. And you get to the New Testament, it's called Sychar. Remember how Jesus meets the woman by the well here. And on one mountain you have Mount Gerizim, and on the other mountain you have Mount Ebal. And they had read to each other the blessings and the cursings, and so they come here to make Rehoboam the king, but they have a request before they do that. And so we read now, when Jeroboam the son of Nebat heard of it, he was living in Egypt, for he was yet in Egypt when he had fled from the presence of King Solomon, because Solomon had figured out, wait a minute, God's going to give the kingdom to him. He can't give him. God can't give the kingdom to somebody who's dead. So he had to flee from Solomon. Verse 3. Then they sent and called him. That is, they called Jeroboam. And Jeroboam and all the assembly of Israel came and spoke to Rehoboam, saying, your father made our yoke hard. Now therefore lighten the hard service of your father and his heavy yoke, which he put on us, and we will serve you. We would like to have a tax cut. That's really what this amounts to. And so you have Rehoboam versus Jeroboam. Now, the names sound alike, so I know it can be confusing. Rehoboam is the son of Solomon, heir apparent to the kingdom. Jeroboam had been the former appointee over the labor projects of Solomon, but now he's been out of the country. Rehoboam seems to be a young man from the way he goes to his young friends, his young advisors. And Jeroboam seems to be, I can't say this for sure, but seems to be a more mature man. In the case of Rehoboam, he's from the tribe of Judah, although his mother was a princess of Ammon. And so, but he's from the tribe of Judah. Jeroboam is from the tribe of Ephraim. He's from one of those northern tribes. And verse 13, the king answered the people harshly, for he forsook the advice of the elders which had given him. The elders had said, you ought to give him the tax cut. Spoken like somebody who's older and wiser. The younger advisors had said, no, just be kingly. Tell them you want taxes, you haven't seen anything yet. So he spoke to them concerning, according to the advice of the young men, saying, my father made your yoke heavy, but I will add to your yoke. My father disciplined you with whips, but I will discipline you with scorpions. You want a king? I'm going to be really kingly, and the most kingly things that kings do is raise taxes. That's what kings do. And so notice what my father did versus what I will do. My father made your yoke heavy. I will add to your yoke. My father disciplined you with whips. I will discipline you with scorpions. I'm going to be more intense and more intentional, or so he says. Verse 15, so the king did not listen to the people, for it was a turn of events from the Lord. Do you catch this? God is the one who was organizing this, orchestrating it, that he might establish his word, which the Lord spoke through Ahijah the Shilonite to Jeroboam the son of Nebat. This reminds me of one of the Proverbs chapter 21, verse 1, that says, the king's heart is like the channels of water in the hand of the Lord. He, that is God, turns it wherever he wishes. And God brings about these things as a judgment on that very king whose heart he is wielding. Chapter 12, verse 16, when all Israel saw that the king did not listen to them, the people answered the king, saying, what portion do we have in David? What do we care about David? We have no inheritance in the son of Jesse. To your tents, O Israel, now look after your own house, David. So Israel departed to their tents, but as for the sons of Israel who lived in the cities of Judah, Rehoboam reigned over them. So he continues to reign over Judah, but not the rest of the land. And so now we're going to have Judah in the south and Israel in the north. And we read that Jeroboam, he becomes the leader of the northern tribes. Jeroboam built Shechem in the hill country of Ephraim. Shechem is between those two. Now, there had been a Shechem already there, but he's going to build it up, make it his palace, make it his capital city. And he went out from there and built another place on the east side of the Jordan. This is called Penuel. Penuel means the face of God. Remember how Jacob had wrestled with an angel there and had called the name of that place Penuel, the face of God, because I've seen God face to face. And so he builds up these two capital cities now for the northern kingdom. Later on, there'll be another one. Now, verse 26, there's a problem. Jeroboam, he's now got his northern kingdom. It's quite a bit bigger than the kingdom of Judah. But he said in his heart, now the kingdom will return to the house of David. If this people go up to offer sacrifices in the house of the Lord at Jerusalem, then the heart of this people will return to the Lord, even to Jeroboam, king of Judah, and they will kill me and return to Rehoboam the king. If they're going down to worship at the temple in Jerusalem, then they're going to hear all this anti-Jeroboam political statements being made. And after a while, the heart of the people is sort of fickle. They'll say, well, maybe those taxes aren't so bad. Yes, let's reunite the kingdom. Let's all be one happy family. And he'll be out of a job. I can't have that happening. So therefore, the king consulted and made 2 golden calves. After all, the golden calf was good enough for Aaron back in the wilderness, is good enough for us. He makes 2 golden calves, and he said to them, it is too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Behold your gods, O Israel, that brought you up from the land of Egypt. Now, I suspect what he means by that is that these calves are made to represent God and his faithfulness. You're not supposed to do that. I don't know that they were necessarily worshiping other pagan gods, but they're using these calves as a way to worship God, and that's idolatry. They're not supposed to do that. And notice he set one up in Bethel. That's way up in the north, way down in the south. There you've got Dan and you've got Bethel. Bethel in the south, just before you get to Jerusalem, if you're headed that way, and one in the north, as far north as you can be, and still be in Israel. You go to Dan today, you can still see the foundations. The archaeologists have dug it out, and now that little metal thing that you see in the foreground, they put that not for people to worship, but just to show where the altar would have been, where it would have stood as part of that worship. And then I would imagine there was a temple up on that higher platform to the right. But here's the high place at Dan. At Bethel, it's a little harder to see, but the one at Dan here, you can still see the ruins of. Now, this thing became a sin, for the people went to worship before the one as far as Dan. So they're going to those two locations, and they begin to worship in those places instead of going to Jerusalem to worship the Lord as he had commanded. And he made houses on high places and made priests from among all the people who were not of the sons of Levi. Levites, they are for the most part going to stay connected to Jerusalem, even if they're not living close to it. And so he needs a different sort of priesthood, and that's what he does. Uh, we don't need to stick with Levi, even though God said to use them. We can look for other gifted people. Other people can have that gift. We shouldn't shut out other people just because they're not from the tribe of Levi, or so he says. And that was wrong. Now, what we're going to see now are the southern kingdom of Judah and the northern kingdom of Israel. And I've put this chart together. I probably borrowed it from a few different people. Southern kingdom of Judah, we're going to see 19 kings and one queen. Hers won't be a good story, let me just say. In the northern kingdom of Israel, we're going to see also 19 kings. Well, that looks pretty equitable until you recognize the northern kingdom is going to be around for 150 years less than the southern kingdom. And that means that those 19 kings are going to get a lot more years out of the ones in Judah than they will get out of their 19 kings in Israel. The capital in the south is Jerusalem. The capital in the north right now is Shechem, Penuel, but eventually that's going to move to a place called Samaria. In the southern kingdom, we have Judah, and I said Benjamin, and of course the Levites. In the northern kingdom, we have the 10 northern tribes. In the southern kingdom, most of these are a bit unstable. Some are good. A couple are bad. Even the good ones, they're pretty good. Yeah, and then you've got some excellent ones. In the northern kingdom, every one of those kings is bad. And two of them, Ahab and Ahaziah, are worshiping. Notice I put idols, but actually they're worshiping pagan gods. So they're way off the deep end. Southern kingdom is going to be conquered by Babylon in 586 BC. The northern kingdom, much earlier, 721 BC, will be conquered and taken into captivity by Assyria. The southern kingdom, after the Babylonian captivity, they're going to come back. Now, not everybody will come back, but enough people to come back and rebuild. The northern kingdom, as tribes, are not going to return. Now, there will be individuals that are left behind, and maybe a few individuals make their way back. So there will be people. They will even know their tribal identity, or at least some of them will, but they won't have the same tribal inheritance. And that's the point that I want to make. Now, 1 Kings chapter 16 and verse 23, in the 31st year of Asa being king of Judah, and notice how now that the kingdom is divided, the story, the narrative is going to go back and forth from south to north to back, and you're going to go with the kings of Israel and the kings of Judah and the kings of Israel. And here in the 31st year of Asa, king of Judah, Omri became king over Israel and reigned 12 years, and he reigned 6 years at Tirzah. He bought the hill Samaria from Shemer, that's why it's called that, for 2 talents of silver, and he built on the hill and named the city which he built Samaria after the name of Shemer, the owner of the hill. Actually, Samaria means the place, the watchtower. Shamar is to look over, to guard. So the name works on that level. And so Samaria will now be the capital from this point forward. It's at a later date. We have Omri, who has a son named Ahab. And he is seeking to make an alliance with the kingdom to the north. Now, we have the Phoenicians living north, but the Phoenicians aren't all together. They've got different kings in different cities. Um, and so over the city of Sidon, you have Ethbaal, also known as Etobaal, and he has a daughter, Jezebel. And so Jezebel and Ahab are going to get married, and Jezebel will now be a queen of Israel. Here's a pagan princess that comes down, becomes a pagan queen now, and she brings her paganism, not just her idols, but her false gods and false prophets for those gods. And so they are all leading Israel into this alternate form of worship, not a worship just of God, but a worship of other gods instead of Yahweh. It is in this setting that Elijah, we read in 1 Kings chapter 17, verse 1, he is first introduced. Now, Elijah the Tishbite, who was of the settlers of Gilead, Gilead's over on the east side of the Jordan River, um, still part of Israel, but on the east side of the Jordan, said to Ahab, "As the Lord, the God of Israel, lives, before whom I stand, surely there shall be neither dew nor rain these years except by my word." Now, when there's no rain in Egypt, that's not a big deal because it hardly ever rains in Egypt, and you have the Nile River coming from 4,000 miles in the south. But when it doesn't rain in Israel, that's serious stuff. They have a rainy season and they have a dry season. Rainy season is in the winter, dry season is the summer. In the spring and the fall, it's sort of moving in that direction, in either direction. But now we're going to see winter come and no rain comes. And so they begin to go through a period of drought. And finally, Elijah calls them together to Mount Carmel, and he puts the question to them, "Are you going to serve Yahweh?" And Elijah comes representing Yahweh, and Ahab comes representing Baal, along with the prophets of Baal that his wife had brought. And the question is, which one are you going to serve? We're going to have it out between these two between these two deities. We'll have a contest of the gods, and the winner will take all. And of course, at the end, um, Yahweh brings fire down from heaven, and it is seen by all that Elijah's God is God, and the people turn to God. But it doesn't really stick because Ahab is still married to Jezebel, and they're still pushing this paganism. Indeed, Jezebel sets out to try to kill Elijah, and he flees all the way down to Mount Sinai, where he has an encounter with God, and God encourages him and gives him a helper eventually. He's going to have a helper by the name of Elisha. So you go from Elijah to Elisha. And this is a good time to talk about our outline of the entire book of 1st and 2nd Kings, because it really revolves around Elijah and Elisha. We started off with the United Kingdom of Solomon. We saw that in chapters 1 through 12. And then there were wars of Judah and Israel where the nation split and they started to fight, and then they stopped fighting, and then they started to fight. Sort of goes back and forth. And then we are introduced, we just looked at this, the ministry of Elijah, starting in chapter 17 and all the way into 2nd Kings. And the pivotal point in the entire story is when Elijah is caught up to heaven and Elisha remains, and the prophetic mantle is passed. Literally, I mean, he drops this cloak, this mantle, and he drops it, and Elisha picks it up, and so the mantle is passed on from Elijah to Elisha. And before that, in the days of Elijah, it's been a time of miracles. We haven't seen miracles in a long, 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 long time. I mean, occasionally, once in a while, but in the days of Elijah, there's fire coming down from heaven, and he would take his cloak and he would hit the Jordan River, and it would divide, and there was resurrections and all sorts of things happening in the days of Elijah. And when Elisha comes on the scene, and chapters 3 through 13 of 2nd Kings will be the ministry of Elisha, the miracles go even larger and bigger and more. It's like the faucet gets turned up, the energy level goes even higher. This ministry of both Elijah and then Elisha. And let me just say, after the ministry of Elisha, the miracles are they're going to fade out. We're not going to see a lot I'm not saying there's no miracles, but very few after this for the rest of the Old Testament. We're not going to read about a lot of miracles in the rest of the Old Testament. God doesn't go on vacation. He's still there. He's still answering prayer, but it won't be these miraculous signs that were happening earlier. After this, we have wars of Judah and Israel again, leading up to that final conflict in chapter 17 when the northern kingdom of Israel is taken into captivity by Assyria. But Judah remains. And so now I have Judah by itself, chapters 18 all the way to the end of the book, when Judah is going to be taken into captivity. That's the entire outline of 1st and 2nd Kings. Notice how it's a unit. We divide it I think we started dividing it probably because they wouldn't all fit on one scroll, and one scroll got sort of bulky. But it's one united book, and I want you to see that. Now, we notice Jezebel and Ahab. Later on, they have 3 children, and one of their children is a daughter, Athaliah, who marries the king of Judah. Now, this is Ahab and Jehoshaphat forming an alliance. So the son of Jehoshaphat, Jehoram, marries the daughter of Ahab and Jezebel, Athaliah. And later on, when they have a child, they have Ahaziah. And both Ahaziah and Joram and the other Ahaziah, and it's sort of confusing because I've got 2 different kings named Ahaziah, but they're all killed. And when they die, Athaliah loses it, and she murders all of the children of Jehoram, the entire Davidic line, but she misses one. She misses young Joash, who is just a baby. And he is taken and he's hidden in the temple, the last place where anyone will think to look. And then about 7 years later, he's brought out and she is overthrown. And we come that close to losing the entire Davidic kingly line. Now, I want to talk for a moment, and not hitting every king, there's just no time for that, but I want to talk about Jonah's world, because this leads up to the departure of and the captivity of the northern kingdom of Israel. Remember, Jonah is sent to the city of Nineveh, and Nineveh, I'm not sure if it was in Jonah's day, but eventually it would become the capital of the Assyrian Empire, and he doesn't want to go. He wants them all to die and go to hell. That's a different story. We'll see that when we get to the book of Jonah. The Assyrians were known for their terror tactics. Now, probably everybody engaged in this sort of thing, but the Assyrians decorated their walls with it. They decorated their palaces with these sorts of stories. How they would take fish hooks and stick them through the lips or through the nose of their captors. How they had actually developed a form of crucifixion and impalement. Others did this too, but others didn't put this on the walls of their palaces. So I'm not calling the Assyrians, well, I'm going to call them terrorists, not because they're doing something everybody else isn't doing, but because they publicize it so well. They worked at getting that reputation of being a terrorist nation. And so here's another picture, again, from a palace wall. You see the heads that are lopped off and gathered, and sometimes they would be gathering hands. As I said, other people did this too, but the Assyrians specialized at telling everybody and showing graphically everyone what they had done. Another picture, notice you've got somebody whose arms and legs are being cut off, and then an image on the right of a city adorned with the heads of the conquered victims. As I said, the Assyrians were very graphic in their portrayal of the treatment of their enemies. Well, in 2 Kings chapter 19 and verse 6, we see that in the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria captured Samaria and carried Israel away into exile to Assyria, settled them in Halah and Habor on the river Gozarks in the cities of the Medes. So they take Israel away, and not just to Assyria, but far off to the east of Assyria, in the mountains to the east, and resettle them there. And then they bring other outsiders and settle them in the land that had formerly belonged to the northern kingdom of Assyria. I'm not saying every single person was taken. I'm sure there were a remnant, and that remnant ends up intermarrying and becoming part of the new people in the land. Eventually, we're going to know of those as Samaritans, but that's going to be still in the future. So here they go into exile into Assyria. In verse 7, now this came about because the sons of Israel had sinned against the Lord their God, who had brought them up from the land of Egypt under the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and they had feared other gods and had walked in the customs of the nations whom the Lord had driven out before the sons of Israel, and in the customs of the kings of Israel which they had introduced. And so we have now in the southern kingdom, we have good King Hezekiah, who had probably observed that taking place, and he decides to lead the country of Judah, the kingdom of Judah, in reformation. We're going to, we're going to get rid of all the idols, the high places, the bad places of worship. He receives envoys from a king known as Merodach Baladan, who's from Babylon. But Babylon is second-rate country at this point. Babylon and Assyria are going to get into it, but Babylon will not succeed, at least not yet. Later on they will. There is a revolt against Assyria, and Hezekiah finds himself sort of in the middle of all of this, and he decides to try to prepare Jerusalem for a siege that he sees is going to come, and it will come. One of the things that Jerusalem had a problem with was their water source. There is a spring nearby, but it's at the bottom of the Kidron Valley, and it's very easy to cut off the city. Remember how David had captured Jerusalem from going up into the water temple, the water tunnel? Well, they're going to seal that off, and Hezekiah is going to have a tunnel dug. Got a picture of that. Notice at the bottom of this illustration, you have a cross-section of the city of Jerusalem as it existed in that day. And you can see that wavy line going through. That's actually the water tunnel that they dug. It doesn't go in a straight line. It probably follows some cracks that were already there. And it's about over 1,700 feet long. I've walked through it. There's a picture that we took. Actually, Paula took this picture of us with a local guide that we had, and we're walking through this tunnel. And our feet are in the water because the water from the spring is flowing through the tunnel, and it goes 1,700 feet. And at the other end of the tunnel, before it comes out, there is an inscription. Now, what you're looking at is a copy of the inscription, because what archaeologists did when they discovered it, they chiseled it out and they took it away. This was back at a time when the Turks were ruling, the Ottoman Empire was ruling over the whole Middle East. And so today, the original inscription is in a museum in Istanbul, in Turkey. But this is a copy. This is what it looked like. And it tells the story of the digging of the tunnel from the workers' point of view. It's funny. We have the Bible telling the story from Hezekiah's point of view. We have this inscription. We call it the Siloam inscription, telling the same story in very ancient Hebrew. You can see the very old Hebrew text telling that story. Now, sure enough, the Assyrians show up, and Hezekiah goes to the Lord. Lord, what do we do? And Isaiah tells Hezekiah, Isaiah is the prophet, and tells Hezekiah, don't worry about it. God has you covered. And sure enough, the Assyrians come and they camp around, and they've taken so many other cities. They surround Jerusalem, and we read 2 Kings chapter 19, verse 35. Then it happened that night that the angel of the Lord went out and struck 185,000 in the camp of the Assyrians. And when men rose early in the morning, behold, all of them were dead. So Sennacherib, king of Assyria, departed and returned home and lived at Nineveh. What is interesting is that we have Sennacherib's version of the story. Now, he's not going to talk about losing 185,000 of his soldiers. That just wouldn't fit. We're going to keep that suppressed. But he does have to talk about Hezekiah. Notice, as for Hezekiah the Jew, who did not submit to my yoke, 46 of his strong-walled cities, as well as the small cities in their neighborhood, which were without number by escalade and bringing up siege engines, I grabbed these cities, and he did. But then Hezekiah himself, and you have to get this, every other king that he mentioned, this king rebelled against me, and I destroyed him, and I cut off his flesh and his arms and his legs and his head, and he goes like this, and then he gets to Hezekiah, where Hezekiah himself, like a caged bird, I shut up in Jerusalem, his royal city. When it came to Hezekiah, I surrounded him. And you expect to say, wait a minute, you mean he's still living? And he has to admit, yes, he still is. because because Sennacherib had to turn around and come home. So we have an independent testimony that tells the story of what happens here. Now, after Hezekiah, his son and his grandson are not following the Lord, but his great grandson Josiah he comes along, and he again is going to turn the people back to the Lord, religious reform in a good sense, returning them back to the Lord. And what they do is they begin to clean up the temple. And as they are cleaning the temple, they come across a scroll of the law. Now, which scroll was this? I like to think maybe it was Deuteronomy, but I can't say so for sure. Maybe it was the entire Mosaic Law, Genesis through Deuteronomy. Whatever it is, they bring it before the king, and they read it before the king, and he says, "Man, we haven't kept any of those laws. We have been really disobeying, and there are curses and blessings there, and those curses, they're going to fall on us." And so they call for a prophet, or in this case, a prophetess, Huldah. She is a woman, but she has the gift of prophecy. And she comes before the king, and she says, "Yes, you have disobeyed, and Judah has disobeyed, the entire country has disobeyed, and this judgment is going to come, but because, Josiah, because of your heart, and because of your cleansing of the temple and the way you're seeking to serve the Lord, it will not come in your lifetime. And you're going to live quite a while." And so Josiah hears this, and his sons aren't going to follow him, but he follows the Lord the rest of his life. And meanwhile, Assyria, remember Assyria that was doing all those bad things? Assyria itself is now going to fall. So here we have Assyria, they're in northern Mesopotamia, and a coalition develops between Babylon and the Medes to the east, and they actually set up an alliance where the daughter of the Medes marries the son of the king of Babylon, and this alliance comes up against Assyria and defeats Assyria, captures and destroys the city of Nineveh. Now, another group that sort of gets into the picture, and they're not part of the alliance, but the Scythians, these are some wild horsemen to the north. They take this opportunity to raid and probably do some damage as well. But they're not part of the alliance. And in the year 612 BC, Assyria has already fallen. And now we have a power vacuum. The Scythians aren't interested. They came in, raided, took some stuff, and went back home. The Medes aren't really that interested as well. They're keeping an eye on things. But it's the young prince from Babylon, whose name is Nebuchadnezzar. And he continues to Carchemish, where the remnants of the Assyrian forces are left, and they have all fled to Carchemish, and they're looking for help, and they will find it from the Pharaoh. Now, the Pharaoh down in Egypt had been placed on the throne by the Assyrians, and his name is Necho. There's been a couple of them, so he's Necho the second, and he's going to march to the aid. Although, really, I think in his mind, he's thinking, whoever wins this battle is going to be the ruler of the world, and I'd like to be the ruler of the world. So he goes up. Notice he had to get through Megiddo, and he also had to bypass Jerusalem to get there. In the process, Josiah comes out to meet him. Is it in battle? Is it supposed to be it's not a friendly meeting, but they have some sort of meet. It's not a meet in Greek because there's no greeting, but there's a meet, and Josiah is killed, the last good king of the southern kingdom of Judah. And the Pharaoh of Egypt actually the people of Judah, they select one of Josiah's children to be king, and the Pharaoh of Egypt says, "No, I'm going to change that. I'm going to put a different son on the throne." But at this battle of Carchemish, Egypt loses, so it's going to be a very short operation on the part of Egypt. And after this, Nebuchadnezzar now is going to come on his way to Egypt, and he's going to conquer Jerusalem. This was the first Babylonian conquest. Arriving in Jerusalem, Nebuchadnezzar conducts what will be eventually the first of 3 eventual deportations. He captures Jerusalem. He allows the king to remain. The king is one of the sons of Josiah. We'll look at him in a future class. But hostages are taken from the Hebrew nobility, including Daniel and his 3 friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and I'm sure there were others involved as well. And they are told, the people of Jerusalem are told, the king of Jerusalem is told, you stay faithful, continue to pay your taxes to Nebuchadnezzar, and everything will be okay. And the prophet Jeremiah warns, God has raised up Nebuchadnezzar. No, he's not a Christian, but God has raised him up. You just do what you're told. You be obedient to the Lord. Don't go trusting in other alliances, and you'll be okay. And instead, they revolt. And so Nebuchadnezzar comes back a second time. And in the second time, by this time, that king of Judah has died, and his son is now reigning in his place, the grandson of Josiah. 597 BC, again, Jerusalem is captured. This time, 10,000 craftsmen are taken along with the prophet Ezekiel, and that young king Jehoiachin are taken into captivity. And another son of Josiah is placed on the throne with the same orders: don't rebel, don't do this anymore, or you'll be sorry. He rebels again, and Nebuchadnezzar comes back a third time, 586 BC. This time the temple is destroyed, and most of the general population, again, not every single person, but there's a general deportation to Babylon, and the kingdom of Judah ceases to exist as a kingdom. So we read 2 Kings chapter 25, verse 9, and we'll close on this note. And he burned the house of the Lord, the king's house, and all the houses of Jerusalem, even every great house he burned with fire. On the 9th of Av, that's around August, 586 BC, the temple was destroyed. Many hundreds of years later, now the temple's going to eventually be rebuilt. And again, on the 9th of Av in the year 70 AD, exactly on the same day, the temple is going to be destroyed again. And people ask sometimes, well, is there a third destruction of the temple? In a sense, there is. Jesus said in John chapter 2, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I'll raise it up. He is the third temple. He is the temple that was destroyed and raised up on the third day.